The revolver trembled in Linda Morales's grip as she faced the mountain man across the cabin's threshold. Her swollen belly pressed against her torn dress, 8 months of pregnancy making her stance unsteady. Snow whipped through the open doorway, stinging her face as she tried to keep the weapon trained on the stranger who had appeared like a ghost from the wilderness. The man stood motionless, his weathered hands raised peacefully at shoulder height. Ice crystals clung to his dark beard, and his eyes, the color of storm clouds, held no fear despite the gun pointed at his chest. Instead, something that looked almost like amusement flickered across his rugged features. "You can keep the gun," he said quietly, his voice carrying the rough cadence of someone more accustomed to talking to mountains than people. "But you might want to consider taking my name instead." Linda's finger hesitated on the trigger. The words made no sense. Nothing about this moment made sense. She had been running for 3 days through the Colorado wilderness, fleeing the bounty hunters who wanted her dead or alive for a crime she had not committed. Her feet were bloody, her supplies exhausted, and now this stranger had found her in what she had hoped would be sanctuary. "I said get back," she managed through chattering teeth. The cabin behind her offered warmth and shelter, but she could not let her guard down, not when so much depended on her survival. The mountain man's gaze dropped briefly to her rounded belly, then returned to her face with something that might have been understanding. The wind howled around them, carrying the promise of a blizzard that would bury the high country for days. "Ma'am," he said with gentle persistence, "that storm's going to kill you and your baby if you stay out here much longer. And I suspect whoever's hunting you won't be far behind." How could he know? Linda's heart hammered against her ribs. She had covered her tracks, stayed off the main trails, avoided settlements. Yet this man spoke as if he understood her situation completely. To understand how Linda Morales came to stand in that doorway, gun in hand and desperation in her heart, we must travel back 6 weeks to the dusty streets of Pueblo, Colorado, where her nightmare began. Linda had worked as a seamstress in Mrs. Henderson's shop, her nimble fingers creating beautiful garments for the town's wealthy ladies. At 24, she had built a quiet life for herself after arriving in Pueblo with nothing but the clothes on her back. The pregnancy had been unexpected, the result of a brief romance with a traveling merchant who had promised to return but never did. The trouble started when Mayor Caldwell's wife accused Linda of stealing a valuable brooch during a fitting. Linda had never seen the piece of jewelry, but Mrs. Caldwell's word carried weight in a town where Linda was still considered an outsider. When the brooch was found planted in Linda's small rented room, the evidence seemed damning. The sheriff, Deputy Marshal Johnson, who owed his position to Mayor Caldwell's influence, had been eager to make an arrest. Linda knew she would never receive a fair trial. The town wanted a scapegoat, and a pregnant woman with no family or connections made an easy target. So she ran. The escape had been desperate and poorly planned. Linda had slipped away during the night, taking only what she could carry in a small satchel. She knew the mountain hens offered her best chance of evading capture, but she had underestimated the harshness of the wilderness. The bounty hunters had picked up her trail within 2 days. 3 men led by a cruel tracker named Black Pete Morrison, who was known throughout Colorado for his ruthless efficiency. The reward posted by Mayor Caldwell was substantial enough to ensure Morrison's dedication to the hunt. Linda had pushed herself beyond exhaustion, following game trails higher into the mountains as winter tightened its grip on the high country. Her food ran out on the second day. Her water froze solid during the frigid nights. The baby inside her seemed to sense the danger, moving restlessly as if sharing her anxiety. On the third morning, she had spotted the cabin through the pine trees. It appeared abandoned, a rough-hewn structure that seemed to have grown from the mountainside itself. Smoke should have been rising from its chimney if anyone lived there, but the gray sky showed no such sign. The cabin door had been unlocked. Inside, she found evidence of recent habitation, but no current occupant. A fire lay ready in the hearth, needing only a match to spring to life. Shelves held basic supplies, and a comfortable bed occupied one corner. Most importantly, the cabin offered protection from the wind and snow that had begun to fall. Linda had just succeeded in lighting the fire when she heard the footsteps on the porch. Heavy boots, moving with the confidence of someone who belonged. She had grabbed the pistol she had taken from her room in Pueblo, a weapon she barely knew how to use, and positioned herself by the door. Now, facing the mountain man who claimed ownership of this sanctuary, Linda tried to read his intentions. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent in harsh conditions. His clothes were well-made but practical, and his boots showed the wear of countless miles. Most unsettling were his eyes, which seemed to see far more than she was comfortable revealing. "The name's Nathan Hill," he said, lowering his hand slightly. "This is my cabin, but you're welcome to it for as long as you need." Linda kept the gun trained on him, though her arms were beginning to ache from the effort. "Why would you help me? You don't even know who I am." Nathan's weathered face softened almost imperceptibly. "I know enough. I know you're running from something that scares you more than pointing a gun at a stranger. I know you're carrying a child who needs his mother to survive. And I know those tracks I've been following for the last day belong to men who mean you harm." The revelation that he had been tracking her pursuers sent a chill through Linda that had nothing to do with the cold. "You've seen them?" "3 men," Nathan confirmed. "Moving fast despite the weather. They'll reach this area by nightfall if the storm doesn't slow them down." Linda's resolve wavered. The gun felt impossibly heavy in her hands, and the warmth from the cabin's interior called to her like a siren song. But trusting this stranger could be the mistake that cost her everything. Nathan seemed to sense her internal struggle. He took a careful step backward, increasing the distance between them. "I'm going to move away from the door now," he said. "You can keep the gun on me if it makes you feel safer. But that baby needs warmth and food, and you need rest. We can figure out the rest later." The sincerity in his voice was harder to fake than the kindness in his eyes. Linda found herself lowering the weapon slightly, though she maintained her grip on it. The baby chose that moment to kick strongly, as if adding its vote to the decision. "All right," she said finally, "but I keep the gun." Nathan nodded solemnly. "Wouldn't expect anything less." He moved past her with careful, non-threatening movements, and Linda stepped aside to let him enter his own cabin. The warmth enveloped her immediately, and she had to fight not to sag with relief. Nathan went straight to the shelves and began gathering supplies. "There's stew in the pot," he said without looking at her. "Been simmering since morning. And coffee if you want it." Linda's stomach clenched with hunger at the mention of food. She had not eaten a proper meal in 3 days. But she maintained her position by the door, the gun still ready in her hands. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again. "What do you want in return?" Nathan paused in his gathering of supplies and looked at her directly. His storm gray eyes held a depth of understanding that made her uncomfortable. "I've been where you are," he said simply. "Running from something that wasn't my fault, with nowhere to turn and no one to trust. Someone helped me once. I'm just returning the favor." The simplicity of his answer was somehow more convincing than any elaborate explanation would have been. Linda found herself studying his face, looking for signs of deception but finding only weathered honesty. "What were you running from?" she asked. Nathan's expression grew distant. "A war that ended badly. Accusations from men who weren't there when the shooting started. The kind of justice that cares more about blame than truth." Linda understood that language. It was the same dialect of injustice that had driven her into these mountains. She lowered the gun another inch. The cabin was larger than it had appeared from outside, with a main room that served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room. The bedroom occupied a separate space, and Linda could see a small loft area that might serve for storage. Everything was clean and well-maintained, suggesting that Nathan took pride in his home despite its remote location. "You live here alone?" Linda asked. Nathan nodded as he ladled stew into a wooden bowl. "Have for about 3 years now. It's peaceful." "Don't you get lonely?" Nathan considered the question as he handed her the bowl. "Sometimes. But lonely's better than dead, and dead's what I'd be if I'd stayed in the valley." Linda accepted the food gratefully, though she kept the gun in her free hand. The stew was rich and warming, filled with meat and vegetables that tasted like heaven after days of hunger. She tried to eat slowly, but her body's desperate need for nourishment made restraint difficult. Nathan watched her eat with the careful attention of someone who understood genuine hunger. When she had finished the first bowl, he refilled it without being asked. "How far along?" he asked, nodding toward her belly. 8 months, Linda replied. "Maybe a little more. First child?" Linda nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of her inexperience. She had no mother to guide her through him, no female relatives to offer advice. The prospect of giving birth alone in the wilderness terrified her almost as much as the bounty hunters. Nathan seemed to sense her fear. There's a woman in the valley, he said quietly, Mrs. Chen. She's helped bring dozens of babies into the world. When the time comes, I can get you to her. The offer was so unexpected that Linda felt tears prick her eyes. Why would you do that for me? You don't even know my name. Nathan settled into a chair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. Names are just words, he said. Actions matter more. Linda studied his face in the firelight. The flames cast dancing shadows across his weathered features, but his eyes remained steady and calm. There was something about his presence that felt solid, reliable in a way that she had not experienced in months. Linda, she said finally. Linda Morales. Nathan nodded as if the information was a gift he would treasure. It's good to meet you, Linda Morales. And like I said, you're welcome to stay as long as you need. Outside, the wind howled with increasing fury, and snow began to fall more heavily. Linda could hear it accumulating on the roof, creating a barrier between the cabin and the hostile world beyond. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel a measure of safety. But that safety was fragile, dependent on the goodwill of a man she had just met. And somewhere in the storm, 3 men were still hunting her. What will you do when they come? Linda asked. The men following me? Nathan's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Depends on what they want and how they ask for it. They want me, Linda said. Dead or alive. There's a bounty. How much? $500. Nathan whistled low. That's serious money. What did you supposedly do? Supposedly stole a brooch from the mayor's wife. But I didn't take it. Someone planted it in my room. Nathan studied her face as if weighing her words. After a long moment, he nodded. I believe you. How can you be sure? Because thieves don't usually run toward the wilderness when they're pregnant and winter's coming. They run towards cities where they can disappear in crowds. Linda felt a surge of gratitude for his faith in her innocence. It had been so long since anyone had believed her story without question. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting warmth and light throughout the cabin. Linda found herself relaxing despite her circumstances. The gun remained in her lap, but her grip on it had loosened considerably. Tell me about this place, she said. How did you find it? Nathan leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant with memory. Built it myself, actually. Took the better part of a year. Cut every log, chinked every gap, laid every stone in that fireplace. Why here? Nathan gestured toward the window, where snow was now falling steadily. Far enough from civilization that most folks won't bother making the climb. Close enough to the valley that I can get supplies when I need them. And the view in summer is something to see. Linda could imagine it. Even in the grip of winter, the mountains held a stark beauty that took her breath away. In warmer months, this place must be paradise. Do you ever think about going back? She asked. To whatever life you left behind? Nathan's expression grew thoughtful. Sometimes. But then I remember why I left, and the urge passes. Linda understood that feeling. Even if she could clear her name, returning to Pueblo would mean facing the whispers and suspicions that would follow her for the rest of her life. Some stains never wash clean, regardless of innocence. The baby moved restlessly within her, and Linda placed a protective hand over her belly. The child seemed calmer now that she was warm and fed, but she could sense its anxiety as clearly as her own. What will happen to us? She asked, though she was not sure if she was speaking to Nathan or to the baby. Nathan's voice was gentle when he replied, We'll figure it out, one day at a time. The simple confidence in his words was more comforting than any elaborate promise would have been. Linda found herself believing that somehow, despite the impossible odds, they might actually survive this. Outside, the storm continued to build, but inside the cabin, warmth and hope began to take root. As the evening wore on, Nathan proved to be a thoughtful host. He offered Linda the bedroom while he prepared to sleep on a bedroll by the fire. When she protested that she was displacing him from his own bed, he simply said that pregnant women needed proper rest more than old soldiers did. Linda wanted to argue, but exhaustion was winning the battle against her pride. She had not slept properly in days, and the warmth of the cabin was making her drowsy despite her circumstances. Before she retired, Nathan showed her the cabin's defenses. A rifle hung above the mantel, and he demonstrated how the heavy wooden bar could secure the door against intruders. If trouble comes, he said, you'll hear it long before it reaches the door. These mountains echo sound for miles. What about you? Linda asked. Will you be able to defend us? Nathan's smile was grim but confident. I've been defending myself in these mountains for 3 years. I know every rock, every tree, every hiding place within 10 miles of here. Linda nodded, finding comfort in his certainty. She retreated to the bedroom where she discovered that Nathan had left clean clothes on the bed. A woman's dress, simple but well made, along with undergarments and warm stockings. Where did these come from? She called out. Nathan's voice came through the door, carefully respectful. Trading post in the valley. I pick up supplies there sometimes. Thought you might need something clean and warm. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to Linda's eyes. When was the last time someone had anticipated her needs without being asked? She could not remember. She changed into the clean clothes, marveling at how much better she felt with warm, dry fabric against her skin. The dress was a little large, which accommodated her pregnancy nicely. When she emerged from the bedroom, Nathan was banking the fire for the night. He looked up as she approached, and she saw approval in his eyes. Better? He asked. Much, Linda replied. Thank you. Nathan nodded and returned to his work with the fire. There's water in the pitcher if you need to wash, and chamber pot under the bed. Anything else you need, just ask. Linda hesitated, then spoke the question that had been troubling her. Why are you being so kind to me? Most men would have turned me away, especially knowing there's trouble following me. Nathan straightened and looked at her directly. His storm gray eyes were serious in the firelight. I told you I'd been where you are, he said, running from injustice with nowhere to turn. The man who helped me was named Samuel Garrett. He was a preacher in a little town called Cedar Falls, and he took me in when everyone else would have turned me over to the authorities. What happened to him? Nathan's expression darkened. Men came looking for me. Samuel refused to give me up, said sanctuary was sacred. They burned his church with him inside it. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Oh, Nathan, I'm so sorry. Nathan nodded grimly. I've carried that guilt for 3 years. Samuel died because he chose to help me. I can't bring him back, but I can honor his memory by doing what he would have done. The weight of his confession settled between them like a physical presence. Linda understood now why Nathan lived alone in these mountains, why he had chosen exile over the chance of clearing his name. You blame yourself, she said softly. Wouldn't you? Linda considered the question. If her presence here led to harm coming to Nathan, would she be able to live with that knowledge? The answer was as clear as it was troubling. Maybe we should both leave, she said. Find somewhere else to go. Nathan shook his head. Storm's too bad now. We'd freeze to death before we made it a mile. And besides, running won't solve anything. Sometimes you have to make a stand. Linda felt the truth of his words, but fear still clutched at her heart. What if they burn this place too? What if you end up like Samuel Garrett? Nathan's smile was sad but determined. Then at least I'll die doing something worthwhile instead of just hiding from my past. Sleep finally claimed her as the storm continued its assault on the mountain, wrapping the cabin in a cocoon of white that would either protect them or become their tomb. Linda woke to the sound of voices outside the cabin. Male voices, rough and demanding, cutting through the morning stillness like blades. Her heart hammered as she recognized the tone, if not the words. The bounty hunters had found them. She slipped from the bed as quietly as possible and crept to the window. 3 men stood in the clearing before the cabin, their horses stamping impatiently in the snow. The leader was a tall, lean man with a cruel face and cold eyes. This had to be Black Pete Morrison, the tracker who had pursued her relentlessly through the mountains. Nathan stood on the cabin's porch, his rifle held casually but ready. Even from her position at the window, Linda could see the tension in his posture. Morning, gentlemen, Nathan said, his voice carrying clearly in the thin mountain air. You're up early for visitors. Morrison spat into the snow. We're not visitors, mountain man. We're here on business. Looking for a woman, pregnant, goes by Linda Morales. Nathan's expression remained neutral. This is a big mountain, lots of places a person could be. Don't play games with us, Morrison snarled. We tracked her here. No, she's inside that cabin. You're welcome to look around, Nathan said calmly, but I should mention that I don't care much for uninvited guests. Morrison's hand moved to the gun at his hip. That sounds like a threat. Just a statement of fact, Nathan replied. Like I said, you're welcome to look around, but you'll do it polite-like, or you won't do it at all. Linda felt sick with fear and guilt. Nathan was risking his life for her, just as Samuel Garrett had done for him. She could not let history repeat itself. She grabbed the pistol from the nightstand and moved toward the bedroom door. She would surrender herself to the bounty hunters rather than see Nathan hurt because of her. But as she reached for the door handle, she heard Morrison's voice take on a more threatening tone. "Here's how this is going to work, Mountain Man. You're going to step aside and let us search that cabin. If the woman's inside, we take her and leave you be. If she's not, we'll apologize for the inconvenience and be on our way." "And if I refuse?" Nathan asked. Morrison's smile was cold as winter wind. "Then we'll search it anyway, after we put you in the ground." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Linda pressed herself against the bedroom door, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Through the thin walls, she could feel the tension building toward an inevitable explosion. Nathan's voice remained steady, but she could hear the steel beneath his calm exterior. "That would be a mistake, friend, a big one." Morrison laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "3 against 1, Mountain Man. I like those odds." "So do I," Nathan replied quietly. The confidence in his voice was startling. Linda could not understand how one man could face 3 armed bounty hunters with such composure. Then she remembered his words from the night before about knowing every rock and tree within 10 miles. "Last chance," Morrison called out. "Step aside or we'll move you aside." Nathan's response was to shift his rifle to a more ready position. The message was clear, without words. Linda heard the scrape of boots on snow as the bounty hunters spread out, seeking better positions. She knew she had only moments before the shooting started. The thought of Nathan dying because of her was unbearable. She threw open the bedroom door and stepped into the main room, the pistol held ready in her hands. "I'm here," she called out loudly enough for the men outside to hear. "There's no need for anyone to get hurt." "Linda, no!" Nathan's voice carried a note of alarm she had not heard before. But it was too late. She was already moving toward the cabin door, determined to end this standoff before blood was shed. "That's far enough, lady," Morrison called out as she appeared in the doorway. "Drop the gun and come out slow." Linda looked at Nathan, who stood rigid with controlled anger. His storm gray eyes met hers, and she saw understanding pass between them. He knew why she was doing this, even if he did not approve. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I can't let you die for me." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he nodded slightly. "It's your choice," he said. "But remember what I told you about taking my name." The words made no more sense now than they had the night before. But Linda filed them away as she stepped past Nathan onto the porch. The cold mountain air hit her like a physical blow, and she had to steady herself against the doorframe. Morrison's cruel smile widened as he saw her. "There's our little thief, $500 walking right into our hands." "I didn't steal anything," Linda said, though she knew the words were wasted. "Course you didn't," Morrison replied mockingly. "They never do. Now drop that gun and come along peaceful-like." Linda looked at the pistol in her hands, then at Nathan, who stood watching with coiled tension. She knew that giving up her weapon would leave her completely at their mercy, but she also knew that keeping it would likely result in a gunfight that Nathan could not win against 3 men. The baby kicked strongly within her, as if protesting the situation. Linda placed a protective hand over her belly and made her decision. She dropped the gun. The weapon landed in the snow with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the mountain stillness. Morrison's smile became triumphant as he gestured for his companions to move forward. "That's a smart girl," he said. "Now come along and no one gets hurt." But as the bounty hunters began to advance, Nathan stepped forward. His movement was casual, almost lazy, but it placed him directly between Linda and the approaching men. "I'm afraid I can't let you take her," he said conversationally. Morrison's face darkened with anger. "We had a deal, Mountain Man." She gave herself up. "No deal," Nathan replied. "She made her choice, and now I'm making mine." The bounty hunters stopped their advance, suddenly uncertain. There was something in Nathan's manner that suggested they had misread the situation. "You're 1 man against 3, Morrison said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Nathan's smile was as cold as the mountain wind. "You're not the first men to make that mistake." What followed happened so quickly that Linda barely had time to process it. Nathan's rifle came up in a smooth motion, and the sharp crack of gunfire echoed off the mountain peaks. Morrison spun and fell, clutching his shoulder as blood stained the snow beneath him. The other two bounty hunters scrambled for their weapons, but Nathan was already moving. He dove behind a pile of firewood as their shots splintered the air where he had been standing. Linda threw herself back against the cabin wall, her hands protectively covering her belly. From his position behind the woodpile, Nathan's voice carried clearly, "You boys picked the wrong mountain to die on." Another shot rang out, and one of Morrison's companions cried out in pain. The remaining bounty hunter began to retreat toward the horses, dragging his wounded partner with him. Morrison struggled to his feet, his face twisted with pain and rage. "This isn't over, Mountain Man. There'll be others coming." Nathan rose from behind the woodpile, his rifle trained on the wounded tracker. "Then they'll find the same reception you did." Morrison and his remaining companion managed to reach their horses, though it was clear that both men were badly hurt. As they rode away, Morrison called back one final threat. "We'll be back with more men. And next time, we won't be so polite about it." Nathan watched them disappear into the forest before lowering his rifle. The sudden silence that followed the gunfight was almost deafening. Linda found herself shaking, whether from cold or shock, she could not tell. The violence had been swift and brutal, a reminder of how quickly death could come in this harsh land. Nathan approached her carefully, his expression gentle despite the hardness that had been in his eyes moments before. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Linda shook her head, though she was not entirely sure it was true. The baby seemed unharmed, still moving normally within her, but her nerves were shattered. "You saved my life," she said quietly. Nathan shrugged as if it was nothing. "Told you I'd been defending myself in these mountains for 3 years. But now they'll come back with more men." "Just like Morrison said." Nathan nodded grimly. "Probably, which means we need to be ready for them." And the aftermath of the gunfight left Linda shaken in ways she had not expected. She had witnessed violence before. Living on the frontier meant that such things were never far away. But this was different. This violence had been committed on her behalf, and she was not sure how to process that knowledge. Nathan seemed to sense her turmoil. He guided her back into the cabin and settled her in a chair by the fire while he prepared coffee. His movements were calm and methodical, as if shooting 3 men was just another part of his morning routine. "Drink this," he said, pressing a warm cup into her hands. "It'll help with the shock." Linda accepted the coffee gratefully, though her hands trembled as she raised it to her lips. The hot liquid helped settle her nerves, but questions continued to swirl through her mind. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Before they come back?" Nathan considered the question as he checked his rifle and began reloading it. "Depends on how badly they're hurt and how determined they are. Could be days, could be weeks. And when they do come back?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "We'll be ready for them." The certainty in his voice should have been comforting, but Linda found herself thinking about Samuel Garrett and the church that had burned because one man chose to help a stranger. She could not bear the thought of Nathan suffering the same fate. "Maybe I should leave," she said quietly. "Find somewhere else to go." Nathan looked up from his rifle, his storm-gray eyes serious. "Where would you go? You're 8 months pregnant in the middle of winter. You wouldn't last a day in this weather." Linda knew he was right, but the guilt was eating at her. "I can't let you die because of me." Nathan set down his rifle and moved to kneel beside her chair. His weathered face was gentle as he looked up at her. "Listen to me, Linda Morales. I made my choice with my eyes wide open. No one forced me to help you, and no one's forcing me to keep helping you. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do." "But Samuel Garrett thought he was doing the right thing too," Linda said, "and look what happened to him." Nathan's expression grew pained, but his voice remained steady. "Samuel knew the risks when he chose to help me, just like I know the risks now. The difference is that this time, I'm not running away when trouble comes." Linda studied his face, seeing the determination there along with something that might have been peace. Nathan Hill had found his place to make a stand, and nothing she could say would change his mind. "Tell me about the war," she said suddenly. "What happened that made you run?" Nathan's face closed off slightly, but after a moment he began to speak. "I was a captain in the Colorado Volunteers. We were chasing a band of raiders who had been hitting settlements along the Arkansas River. Found their camp one morning just before dawn." He paused, his gaze distant with memory. "The attack went wrong from the start. Someone had given the raiders information about our movements. They were ready for us. Half my men were dead before we knew what hit us." What did you do? What any soldier would do. I tried to get my men out alive, but in the confusion, some of the raiders escaped. Later, when the higher-ups needed someone to blame for the disaster, they decided I must have been the one feeding information to the enemy. Were you? Nathan's eyes met hers directly. No, but the evidence they manufactured was convincing enough to fool a court-martial. I had a choice between a firing squad and running. I chose to run. Linda felt a surge of anger on his behalf. That's not justice. No, Nathan agreed. It's not, but it's the way the world works sometimes. The truth doesn't matter as much as having someone to blame. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the snow continued to fall, adding to the barrier between the cabin and the hostile world beyond. Nathan, Linda said eventually, last night and again this morning, you mentioned something about taking your name. What did you mean? Nathan's cheeks colored slightly, and he looked away. It's nothing. Just something I said without thinking. But Linda sensed there was more to it than that. She pressed gently. Tell me. Nathan was quiet for so long that Linda thought he would not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Your baby's going to need a father. And you're going to need a husband if you want to make a life anywhere civilized. I thought maybe if you were willing, we could help each other. The suggestion hung in the air between them like smoke from the fire. Linda felt her heart skip a beat as she processed what he was offering. You're proposing marriage? To someone you've known for less than 24 hours? Nathan's face reddened further. I know it sounds crazy, but marriages have been built on less. And like I said, we could help each other. Linda stared at him, trying to understand what had prompted such an offer. How do you know I'm not really a thief? How do you know I wouldn't just take advantage of your kindness and leave? Nathan met her gaze steadily. Because I've been watching you since you got here. The way you handle yourself, the way you talk, the way you worry about putting me in danger. Those aren't the actions of a criminal. But marriage, Linda said, the word feeling strange on her tongue. That's a lifetime commitment. Nathan nodded solemnly. It is. But what's the alternative? You can't raise a child alone in this country. And I've been alone in these mountains long enough to know that some kinds of loneliness eat at a man's soul. Linda found herself considering the proposal more seriously than she would have thought possible. Nathan Hill was a good man, that much was clear. He had risked his life for her, offered her sanctuary when she had nowhere else to turn. But marriage was about more than practical considerations. What about love? She asked quietly. Nathan's smile was sad but understanding. Love's a luxury that folks like us might not be able to afford. But respect, partnership, shared goals, those things can build something strong enough to last. Linda placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby move restlessly within her. The child would need stability, a name, a father's protection. In the harsh reality of frontier life, Nathan's practical approach to marriage made a certain kind of sense. But could she commit her life to a man she barely knew, even one as honorable as Nathan Hill seemed to be? I need time to think, she said finally. Nathan nodded. Of course, it's not a decision to make lightly. Before Linda could respond, the sound of approaching horses reached their ears. Nathan was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving to the window with practiced stealth. How many? Linda whispered. Nathan peered through the glass, his face grim. Too many. Through the window, Linda could see at least 8 riders approaching through the snow. They moved with military precision, spreading out to surround the cabin in a coordinated pattern that spoke of professional training. These were not the crude bounty hunters who had fled earlier. Nathan's jaw was set in a hard line as he assessed their situation. We're outnumbered, he said quietly. Badly. Linda felt panic rising in her chest. What do we do? Nathan moved away from the window and began gathering supplies with swift efficiency. There's a root cellar behind the cabin, he said. Hidden entrance under a pile of firewood. You can hide there while I try to draw them away. No, Linda said immediately. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. Nathan paused in his preparations and looked at her with those storm-gray eyes. Linda, listen to me carefully. Those men out there aren't here to take you back for trial. Morrison's probably told them that you and I killed his partners. They're here for revenge, and they won't be taking prisoners. The cold reality of their situation settled over Linda like a shroud. She had brought death to Nathan's doorstep, just as he had once brought it to Samuel Garrett's. There has to be another way, she said desperately. Nathan's expression softened slightly. Maybe there is, but it would require you to trust me completely. I do trust you, Linda said, and realized as she spoke the words that they were true. Nathan nodded, then moved to a wooden chest in the corner of the cabin. From it, he withdrew a small leather pouch and what appeared to be official documents. These are my discharge papers from the Army, he said, and this is my father's wedding ring. He was a preacher before he died. Linda stared at him in confusion. I don't understand. Nathan's plan was audacious in its simplicity. If Linda was his wife, legally married, then she would have the protection of his name and status. The bounty hunters might still want her, but they would have to go through proper legal channels rather than simply taking her by force. You want to marry me now? Linda asked. Right here with those men surrounding us. Nathan's smile was grim but determined. My father always said that desperate times call for desperate measures, and I can't think of a more desperate time than this. But you're not a preacher, Linda protested. No, but I know the words, and in the eyes of God, intention matters more than official sanction. Linda looked toward the window where she could see the armed men taking positions around the cabin. The sound of their voices carried on the cold air, discussing strategy and positioning. Time was running out. You really want to do this? She asked. Nathan moved to stand before her, his weathered face serious but gentle. Linda Morales, I'm offering you my name, my protection, and my promise to stand by you for as long as we both shall live. Will you take them? The proposal was unlike anything Linda had ever imagined. No flowers, no romantic words, just a practical offer of partnership in the face of mortal danger. Yet there was something deeply moving about Nathan's quiet sincerity. The baby kicked strongly within her, as if adding its own vote to the decision. Linda thought about the life she could build with this man, the safety he offered, the respect he had already shown her. Yes, she said quietly. I'll take them. Nathan's smile transformed his entire face, revealing a warmth that had been hidden beneath his careful composure. He took her hands in his weathered ones, and Linda was surprised by their gentleness. Then before God and these mountains as witnesses, he said solemnly, I, Nathan Hill, take you, Linda Morales, to be my wife. I promise to protect you, provide for you, and stand by you through whatever trials may come. Linda felt tears prick her eyes as she responded with words that felt both foreign and right on her tongue. I, Linda Morales, take you, Nathan Hill, to be my husband. I promise to honor you, support you, and stand by you through whatever trials may come. Nathan slipped his father's ring onto her finger. It was too large, but Linda closed her hand around it, feeling its weight like a talisman against the dangers surrounding them. By the authority vested in me by desperation and necessity, Nathan said with a slight smile, I now pronounce us husband and wife. The ceremony was interrupted by a voice calling from outside the cabin. Hill, Nathan Hill, we know you're in there. Nathan squeezed Linda's hand once, then moved to the door. His transformation back into a warrior was swift and complete. I'm here, he called back. What do you want? The voice belonged to a man with authority, someone accustomed to being obeyed. My name is Captain Morrison, Colorado Territorial Militia. I'm here about the assault of my brother and his associates. So Morrison had been more than just a bounty hunter. That explained the military precision of the men surrounding them. Your brother attacked my property and threatened my wife, Nathan replied calmly. I defended what was mine. Wife? Captain Morrison's voice carried surprise and suspicion. Nathan looked at Linda, who nodded her understanding. She moved to stand beside him at the door, her hand resting protectively on her belly. That's right, Nathan said. Linda Hill, my lawfully wedded wife. And if you want to take her anywhere, you'll need proper legal authority, not just guns and threats. There was a long pause from outside, followed by the sound of urgent conversation among the militiamen. Linda could not make out the words, but she could hear the uncertainty in their voices. Captain Morrison's voice came again, less confident than before. The woman is wanted for theft in Pueblo. There's a warrant for her arrest. Then present it to the proper authorities, Nathan replied. My wife and I will be happy to answer any legal charges through the courts. Another pause, longer this time. Linda could sense the captain's frustration as his simple mission became complicated by legal considerations. This isn't over, Hill, Morrison finally called out. We'll be back with proper papers. You know where to find us, Nathan replied. The sound of horses departing was like music to Linda's ears, but Nathan remained tense until the last hoofbeat faded into the distance. They'll be back, he said grimly, and next time they'll have legal authority to take you. Linda nodded, understanding the temporary nature of their reprieve. But we bought ourselves time. Nathan turned to look at her, and Linda was struck by the change in his expression. The warrior was gone, replaced by something softer but no less determined. We did, he agreed, Mrs. Hill. The name sounded strange to Linda's ears, but not unpleasant. She looked down at the ring on her finger, still too large but somehow right. Do you regret it, she asked, marrying a woman you barely know? Nathan considered the question seriously. Ask me again in a year, he said finally. But right now, it feels like the best decision I've made in a long time. Linda found herself smiling despite their circumstances. And what happens now? We can't stay here forever. Nathan moved to the window and looked out at the snow-covered landscape. No, we can't. But we have options now that we didn't have before. Such as? Nathan's plan was both simple and complex. As a married couple, they could present themselves to the authorities in Denver rather than waiting for the authorities to come to them. In a larger city, with proper legal representation, Linda would have a better chance of clearing her name. But the journey to Denver would be dangerous, especially with Linda so close to giving birth. They would need to wait for better weather and plan their route carefully. How long? Linda asked. Spring, Nathan said. Maybe late winter if we're lucky. The passes won't be clear before then. Linda calculated quickly. The baby would be born long before then, probably within the next few weeks. The thought of giving birth in this remote cabin with only Nathan to help was terrifying. Nathan seemed to read her thoughts. I told you about Mrs. Chen in the valley. She's helped deliver dozens of babies. When your time comes, I'll get you to her. And if the weather's too bad, if we can't make it, then we'll manage here, Nathan said with quiet confidence. Women have been having babies for thousands of years without doctors or hospitals. We'll figure it out. His calm certainty was reassuring, but Linda still felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. So much could go wrong. So many things were beyond their control. Nathan seemed to sense her anxiety. He moved to sit beside her, his presence solid and comforting. I know this isn't what you planned for your life, he said gently. Being married to a stranger, hiding in the mountains, facing an uncertain future. Linda looked at his weathered face, seeing the kindness there along with the strength. It's not what I planned, she agreed, but plans don't always work out the way we expect. No, Nathan said, they don't. But sometimes what we get instead turns out to be better than what we plan. Linda found herself studying her new husband with fresh eyes. Nathan Hill was not the kind of man she had ever imagined marrying. He was older than she had expected to marry, more weathered, more complicated, but there was something about him that felt solid, dependable in a way that the merchant who had fathered her child never had. Tell me about your father, she said. The preacher. Nathan's expression grew distant with memory. He was a good man, tough when he needed to be, but gentle with those who were hurting. He used to say that God's love showed itself through human kindness. Is that why you helped me? Because of what he taught you? Partly, Nathan admitted, but mostly because it was the right thing to do. Linda felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. She was beginning to understand that she had married a man of genuine character, someone whose word could be trusted completely. The baby chose that moment to kick strongly, and Linda gasped at the intensity of the movement. Nathan's eyes immediately went to her belly, concern written across his features. Are you all right? Linda nodded, though the kick had been unusually forceful. The baby's just restless. It's been moving a lot more lately. Nathan's expression grew thoughtful. How much more? Linda considered the question. A lot more. Almost constantly for the past day or two. Nathan was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. Linda, I think your baby might be getting ready to be born. The possibility had occurred to Linda as well, but she had been trying not to think about it. The timing could hardly be worse, with bounty hunters and militiamen hunting them, and winter storms raging outside. How can you tell? She asked. Nathan's smile was gentle. I've helped with enough animal births to recognize the signs. The restlessness, the increased movement, the way you've been shifting uncomfortably. Your body's preparing. Linda felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She had been looking forward to meeting her child for months, but the circumstances were far from ideal. "What do we do?" she asked. Nathan stood and began moving around the cabin with purposeful energy. "First, we prepare. I'll get everything ready in case the baby decides to come sooner rather than later. Then, if the weather breaks, we'll try to get you down to Mrs. Chen. And if the weather doesn't break?" Nathan's smile was confident despite the uncertainty of their situation. "Then we welcome your baby into the world right here in this cabin. It's not the worst place for a child to be born." Linda looked around the simple but comfortable cabin, imagining bringing her child into the world within these walls. There was something appealing about the idea, despite the risks involved. "Nathan," she said quietly, "thank you for everything." Nathan paused in his preparations and looked at her with those storm gray eyes that had become so familiar in such a short time. "Thank you," he replied, "for giving me a chance to be the man Samuel Garrett thought I could be." The weight of his words settled between them, carrying the promise of a future neither had planned, but both were willing to embrace. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside the cabin, hope was taking root like a seed planted in fertile ground. The next few days passed in a strange kind of domestic tranquility that Linda had never experienced before. Despite the danger that surrounded them, she found herself settling into the rhythm of life with Nathan Hill. He was a considerate husband, thoughtful and respectful in ways that surprised her. Nathan had set up a comfortable area near the fire where Linda could rest when the baby's movements became too intense. He cooked for her, brought her tea when she was restless, and talked to her about everything and nothing as the hours passed. "Tell me about the valley," Linda said one afternoon as she watched him prepare their evening meal. "The place where Mrs. Chen lives." Nathan's face lit up as he described the hidden valley that lay several miles down the mountain. It was a sheltered place where a small community of families had built a life away from the troubles of the outside world. "They're good people," he said, "mostly folks who came west looking for a fresh start." Mrs. Chen and her husband arrived from California about 5 years ago. She was a midwife in San Francisco before they decided they wanted a quieter life. "It sounds peaceful," Linda said wistfully. "It is," Nathan agreed. "I've thought about moving down there myself sometimes, building a proper house, maybe starting a family." He paused, seeming to realize what he had said. His cheeks colored slightly as he looked at Linda. "I guess I am starting a family now," he said quietly. Linda felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the baby's movements. The idea of building a life with Nathan in the peaceful valley he described was more appealing than she wanted to admit. "Would they accept me?" she asked, knowing about the bounty, the accusations. Nathan nodded confidently. "Like I said, they're mostly folks who came west for a fresh start. They understand that sometimes good people get caught up in bad situations." The baby kicked strongly, and Linda winced at the intensity. The movements were becoming more frequent and more powerful, leaving her exhausted and uncomfortable. Nathan noticed her distress immediately. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Linda admitted, "and nervous. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't do this?" Nathan moved to sit beside her, his presence comforting and solid. "You're stronger than you think, Linda Hill. I've seen how you handle adversity, how you keep going even when things look hopeless. You'll do fine." The use of her new name still felt strange, but Linda was beginning to like the sound of it. Linda Hill. It had a solid, respectable ring that Linda Morales had somehow lacked. That night, Linda woke to intense cramping that took her breath away. She lay in the darkness for several minutes, trying to determine if this was the beginning of labor or just another false alarm. But when the next contraction hit, stronger and more focused than anything she had experienced before, she knew her time had come. "Nathan," she called softly. "Nathan, I think it's starting." Nathan was awake instantly, moving with the quick efficiency she had come to associate with him. He lit a lamp and knelt beside the bed, his eyes alert and focused. "How far apart are the pains?" he asked. Linda tried to think through the discomfort. "Maybe 10 minutes? I'm not sure." Nathan nodded calmly. "We have time then. Let me check the weather and see if we can make it to the valley." But when Nathan opened the door, a wall of snow and wind nearly knocked him backward. The storm that had been building all day had become a full blizzard, making travel impossible. "We're not going anywhere in this," he said as he fought to close the door against the wind. Linda felt a moment of panic, but Nathan's calm demeanor helped steady her nerves. It's all right, he said gently. Women have been having babies for thousands of years. We'll manage just fine. Nathan began gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. Clean linens, hot water, sharp knives, everything he thought they might need. His movements were confident, as if delivering babies was something he did regularly. Have you done this before? Linda asked during a brief respite between contractions. Animals mostly, Nathan admitted, but the principles are the same. Nature knows what it's doing. Linda was not entirely comforted by the comparison to animal births, but Nathan's confidence was reassuring. She found herself trusting his competence, even in this unfamiliar situation. The labor progressed slowly through the night. Nathan stayed by her side, offering encouragement and support as the contractions grew stronger and more frequent. He heated water, prepared clean linens, and spoke to her in a calm, steady voice that helped her focus through the pain. "You're doing beautifully," he said during one particularly difficult contraction. "Just breathe through it. Let your body do what it knows how to do." Linda gripped his hand tightly, drawing strength from his steady presence. She had never imagined that childbirth would be something she would share with a man she had known for less than a week. But Nathan's gentle competence made it feel natural. As dawn broke over the mountains, Linda felt the unmistakable urge to push. Nathan positioned himself to help, his weathered hands gentle but sure. "I can see the baby's head," he said with quiet excitement. "Just a little more, Linda. You're almost there." With a final, tremendous effort, Linda pushed her child into the world. The baby's cry filled the cabin, strong and healthy and absolutely perfect. "It's a boy," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Linda watched through tears of exhaustion and joy as Nathan cleaned her son and wrapped him in soft blankets. When he placed the baby in her arms, she felt a love so intense it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Nathan knelt beside the bed, his storm gray eyes bright with unshed tears. "He's perfect, Linda. Absolutely perfect." Linda looked at her husband, this man who had delivered her son with such gentle skill, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not thought possible. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Nathan's smile was radiant. "Thank you for letting me be part of this." As Linda held her son close, she realized that despite all the uncertainty and danger that surrounded them, this moment was perfect. She had brought her child into the world in the arms of a good man who had already proven his devotion to them both. The baby's eyes opened, dark and alert, and Linda felt as if he was looking directly into her soul. "What should we call him?" Nathan asked softly. Linda considered the question, thinking about the man who had given them both sanctuary and protection. "Samuel," she said finally. "Samuel Hill, after the preacher who helped you." Nathan's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded wordlessly. It was a perfect name for a child born in the mountains, a name that carried the promise of hope and new beginnings. The first few days after Samuel's birth passed in a haze of wonder and exhaustion. Linda found herself marveling at her son's tiny fingers and perfect features, while Nathan proved to be a natural father, despite having no experience with babies. He fashioned a cradle from pine boards, carved toys from scraps of wood, and spent hours simply watching the baby sleep. Linda was touched by his obvious devotion to a child who was not biologically his. "You don't have to do all this," she said one afternoon as Nathan worked on a small wooden rattle. "He's not really your son." Nathan looked up from his carving, his expression serious. "He's my son in every way that matters. I was there when he was born. I'll be there as he grows up. Blood doesn't make a father, Linda. Choice does." The simple truth of his words brought tears to Linda's eyes. Samuel was lucky to have Nathan as a father, she realized. The merchant who had actually fathered him would never have shown such dedication. The storm that had trapped them during Samuel's birth finally began to clear on the fourth day. Nathan ventured outside to assess conditions and returned with cautious optimism. "The worst is over," he reported. "We should be able to make it to the valley in a day or two if the weather holds." Linda felt a mixture of relief and nervousness at the prospect of leaving the cabin. It had become their sanctuary, the place where Samuel had been born and their family had truly begun. But she knew they could not stay hidden forever. "What will we tell people?" she asked. "About how we met, about Samuel?" Nathan had clearly given this some thought. "We'll tell them the truth mostly, that you were fleeing false accusations, that I helped you, that we fell in love and married. People don't need to know all the details. And Samuel? Nathan's smile was gentle. Samuel is our son, born a little early but healthy and strong. No one needs to know anything else. Linda nodded, understanding the wisdom of keeping their story simple. The fewer complications they introduced, the easier it would be to build a new life in the valley. That evening, as they sat by the fire with Samuel sleeping peacefully between them, Linda found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed in such a short time. 2 weeks ago, she had been a desperate fugitive with no hope of escape. Now she was a wife and mother, part of a family that felt more real than anything she had ever experienced. Nathan, she said quietly, do you ever regret it? Everything that's happened? Nathan considered the question as he watched the flames dance in the fireplace. There are things I regret, he said finally. I regret that Samuel Garrett died because of me. I regret that you had to go through so much fear and hardship. I regret that our son was born into a world where his mother is still wanted by the law. But do you regret helping me? Regret marrying me? Nathan turned to look at her, his storm gray eyes reflecting the firelight. Never, he said firmly. Helping you was the first truly good thing I'd done since Samuel died. Marrying you gave me a family I never thought I'd have. I don't regret any of it. Linda felt warmth spread through her chest. She was beginning to understand that what she felt for Nathan was growing beyond gratitude and partnership. Respect had deepened into affection, and affection was slowly becoming something that might eventually be called love. The baby stirred in his sleep, making soft sounds that tugged at Linda's heart. She reached out to touch his tiny hand, marveling again at the perfection of his small fingers. He's going to have a good life, she said with quiet confidence. Whatever happens with the legal troubles, whatever challenges we face, Samuel is going to grow up knowing he's loved and wanted. Nathan nodded, his expression tender as he watched mother and child. He's going to grow up knowing what it means to be part of a real family. The next morning brought clear skies and the promise of safe travel. Nathan spent the day preparing for their journey to the valley, packing supplies and fashioning a sling that would allow Linda to carry Samuel securely during the trip. Are you sure you're strong enough for this? He asked as Linda tested the baby carrier. Linda felt tired and sore from childbirth, but she was determined to reach the safety of the valley community. I'm ready. I'm ready, she said. We all are. Nathan loaded their supplies onto a sturdy pack horse he kept for such journeys. The animal was sure-footed and calm, perfect for mountain travel. He also saddled his riding horse, a gentle mare that could carry Linda and Samuel comfortably. As they prepared to leave the cabin, Linda took one last look around the simple room where so much of their life together had begun. The place where she had first pointed a gun at Nathan, where they had married in desperation, where their son had been born. Thank you, she whispered to the empty room. Nathan understood her sentiment. This place had been good to them, had sheltered them through the most crucial days of their relationship. But it was time to move forward, to build a future in the wider world. The journey down the mountain was easier than Linda had expected. Nathan knew every trail and shortcut, guiding them along paths that were clear of snow and safe for the horses. Samuel slept peacefully against her chest, lulled by the gentle motion of travel. As they descended, the landscape gradually changed from harsh alpine terrain to gentler slopes covered with pine and aspen. The air grew warmer, and Linda could see why Nathan spoke so fondly of the valley below. When they finally crested the last ridge and looked down into the hidden valley, Linda gasped at the beauty spread before them. A small river wound through meadows that would be green in summer, and neat farmsteads dotted the landscape. Smoke rose from chimneys, and she could see people moving about their daily tasks. It's beautiful, she breathed. Nathan's smile was proud. Wait until you meet the people. They're even better than the scenery. As they rode down into the valley, Linda felt a sense of homecoming that surprised her. This place felt right in a way that nowhere else ever had. Perhaps it was because she was arriving not as a fugitive, but as part of a family, with a husband and child who belonged to her completely. The first person they encountered was a woman working in a garden near the largest farmhouse. She looked up as they approached, her face breaking into a warm smile of recognition. Nathan Hill, she called out. We were wondering when you'd come down from that mountain of yours. Nathan dismounted and helped Linda down from her horse, taking care to support both her and the baby. Mrs. Chen, he said warmly, I'd like you to meet my wife, Linda. And our son, Samuel. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened with surprise and delight. Wife? Son? Nathan Hill, you've been keeping secrets. Nathan's grin was sheepish. It's been an eventful few weeks. Mrs. Chen approached them with the confident manner of someone accustomed to taking charge. She was a small woman with graying hair and kind eyes, and Linda liked her immediately. Let me see this baby, Mrs. Chen said, her voice gentle but authoritative. Linda carefully unwrapped Samuel from his blankets, revealing the sleeping infant to the midwife's experienced gaze. Mrs. Chen examined him with gentle hands, her expression growing more pleased by the moment. He's perfect, she pronounced. Strong and healthy. How old? 5 days, Linda said. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose. You gave birth on the mountain? Nathan answered for her. During the blizzard. We couldn't make it down here in time. Mrs. Chen looked at Nathan with new respect. You delivered this baby yourself? Nathan nodded modestly. Linda did all the hard work. I just helped. Mrs. Chen shook her head in amazement. Well, you both did beautifully. This is one of the finest babies I've ever seen. Word of Nathan's return with a wife and newborn son spread quickly through the small valley community. By evening, a steady stream of neighbors had come to welcome them and meet the newest addition to their population. Linda found herself overwhelmed by the warmth of their reception. These people, who had never met her before, welcomed her as if she had always belonged among them. They brought gifts for the baby, food for the new parents, and offers of help with anything they might need. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, who owned the largest farm in the valley, immediately offered Nathan and Linda the use of a small cabin on their property until they could build their own home. It's not much, Mrs. Patterson said apologetically. Just 2 rooms and a loft. But it's clean and warm, and you're welcome to it for as long as you need. Linda was touched by their generosity. We can't thank you enough, she said. Nonsense, Mr. Patterson replied. That's what neighbors are for. As the evening wore on, Linda found herself relaxing in a way she had not been able to do in months. These people asked no uncomfortable questions about her past, made no judgments about her circumstances. They simply accepted her as Nathan's wife and Samuel's mother, and that was enough. Nathan seemed to bloom in the company of his friends and neighbors. Linda saw a side of him she had not seen before, more social and outgoing than the solitary mountain man she had first met. It was clear that he was well respected in the community, valued for his skills, and trusted for his character. Later, as they settled into the small cabin that would be their temporary home, Linda reflected on how much her life had changed. They like you, Nathan said as he banked the fire for the night. They like us, Linda corrected. I can see why you spoke so fondly of this place. Nathan nodded, his expression content. It's a good place to raise a family. The word family still felt new to Linda, but increasingly right. Looking at Nathan holding Samuel, watching him interact with their neighbors, she could envision a future here that included all the things she had thought lost to her forever. Over the next few weeks, they settled into the rhythm of valley life. Nathan found work helping with various projects around the community, his skills as a carpenter and hunter, making him valuable to his neighbors. Linda gradually regained her strength and began contributing to the community in her own ways, helping with cooking and sewing for families in need. Samuel thrived in the peaceful environment. He was a content baby, rarely fussy, and seemed to enjoy the attention he received from the other valley residents. Linda often found herself watching Nathan with their son, marveling at the natural way he had taken to fatherhood. One afternoon, as Linda was hanging laundry behind their cabin, Mrs. Chen approached with a serious expression. Linda, dear, she said quietly, there's something we need to discuss. Linda felt a chill of apprehension. What is it? Mrs. Chen glanced around to ensure they were not overheard. There were men here yesterday asking questions about you and Nathan, official-looking men with badges. Linda's heart sank. The legal troubles she had hoped to leave behind had followed them even here. What did you tell them? She asked. Mrs. Chen's smile was fierce. I told them I'd never heard of anyone by that name. So did everyone else they talked to. Linda felt a surge of gratitude for the protection these people were offering her, but she also felt guilt for bringing danger to their peaceful community. I should leave, she said quietly. I don't want to bring trouble to you and your neighbors. Mrs. Chen's expression grew stern. Nonsense. You're part of this community now. We protect our own. But Linda knew that the authorities would not give up easily. Eventually, they would return with more men and more legal authority. She could not allow these good people to suffer because of her problems. That evening, she discussed the situation with Nathan. He listened gravely as she related her conversation with Mrs. Chen, his expression growing more troubled as she spoke. "They'll be back," he said finally. "With warrants and legal papers this time." Linda nodded, "which means we need to leave before they return." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, holding Samuel while he considered their options. "There might be another way," he said eventually. "What do you mean?" Nathan's plan was bold and risky. Instead of running again, they would travel to Denver and confront the legal charges directly. With proper legal representation and the testimony of character witnesses from the Valley community, Linda might be able to clear her name once and for all. "It's dangerous," Nathan admitted. "If we lose, you could face prison or worse." "And if we win?" Linda asked. "If we win," Nathan said, his storm gray eyes bright with hope, "then we can build our life here without looking over our shoulders." Linda considered the proposal carefully. It would mean risking everything they had built together, but it also offered the possibility of true freedom. "What about Samuel?" she asked. "What if something happens to me?" Nathan's voice was firm with conviction. "Nothing will happen to you. I won't let it." Linda looked at her husband, this man who had risked everything for her from the moment they met. His faith in their ability to overcome these challenges was infectious. "All right," she said finally. "Let's go to Denver." Nathan's smile was radiant. "We'll leave in the spring when the passes are clear and travel is easier. That gives us time to prepare our case and gather support." Linda nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. The next few months would determine whether they could truly build a life together, or whether the past would destroy everything they had worked to create. But as she looked at Nathan holding their son, she felt a confidence she had not experienced in months. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The winter passed peacefully in the valley. Nathan and Linda grew closer as they shared the daily responsibilities of caring for Samuel and contributing to their community. Linda found herself falling in love with her husband in a way that surprised her with his depth and intensity. Nathan was everything she had never known she wanted in a partner. He was strong but gentle, decisive but considerate, passionate but controlled. He treated her as an equal while protecting her as a husband should, and he loved Samuel with a devotion that brought tears to her eyes. As spring approached and the time for their journey to Denver drew near, Linda felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. She was no longer the desperate fugitive who had stumbled into Nathan's cabin months before. She was Linda Hill, wife and mother, part of a family and community that would support her through whatever trials lay ahead. The night before they were to leave for Denver, Linda stood outside their cabin looking up at the stars that shone so brightly in the mountain sky. Nathan joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they contemplated the uncertain future. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. Linda leaned back against his solid warmth, drawing strength from his presence. "With you beside me, I'm ready for anything." Nathan's arms tightened around her. "Whatever happens in Denver, we'll face it together. You, me, and Samuel. Nothing will change that." Linda turned in his arms to face him, seeing the love and determination in his storm gray eyes. "I love you, Nathan Hill," she said, the words coming easily now. "I love you more than I ever thought possible." Nathan's smile was radiant in the starlight. "I love you too, Linda Hill." More than mountains, more than freedom, more than life itself, they kissed under the vast mountain sky, two people who had found in each other something worth fighting for, something worth risking everything to protect. The journey to Denver took place in the early spring, when the mountain passes were clear, but the weather remained unpredictable. Nathan had arranged for legal representation through contacts in the Valley community, and they traveled with letters of recommendation from their neighbors testifying to Linda's character. Samuel, now several months old, proved to be an excellent traveler. He seemed to enjoy the motion of the wagon Nathan had borrowed for the journey, sleeping peacefully during the day and remaining content during their evening stops. As they descended from the mountains toward the plains where Denver lay, Linda felt her nervousness increasing. Everything they had built together would be put to the test in the courtrooms of the territorial capital. Nathan seemed to sense her anxiety. He reached over to take her hand as they drove, his weathered fingers intertwining with hers. "Remember what we talked about," he said gently. "We tell the truth, we trust in justice, and we face whatever comes together." Linda nodded, drawing strength from his calm confidence. She had learned to trust Nathan's judgment completely over the past months, and his faith in their ability to prevail helped steady her nerves. Denver was larger and more bustling than Linda had expected. The streets were crowded with people and vehicles, and the noise and activity were overwhelming after months in the peaceful valley. But Nathan navigated the chaos with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. Their lawyer, Mr. Roberts, proved to be both knowledgeable and sympathetic to their situation. He listened carefully to Linda's account of the events in Pueblo, asking detailed questions and taking careful notes. "The evidence against you is circumstantial," he said after reviewing all the details. "The brooch was found in your room, but there's no proof you put it there. And the timing of your departure could be explained by fear rather than guilt." "What are our chances?" Nathan asked. Mr. Roberts considered the question carefully. "Better than I initially expected. Your marriage and the birth of your son complicate things for the prosecution. They were expecting to deal with a desperate fugitive, not a respectable married woman with community support." This trial proved to be less dramatic than Linda had feared. Mr. Roberts presented a careful case that emphasized the lack of direct evidence against Linda and the suspicious timing of the brooch's discovery. He called character witnesses from the Valley community who testified to Linda's honesty and integrity. The prosecution's case seemed weak and motivated more by politics than justice. Mayor Caldwell himself testified, but his obvious bias and personal animosity toward Linda worked in her favor rather than against her. Nathan sat in the courtroom throughout the proceedings, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his arms. His presence was a constant source of strength for Linda, reminding her that whatever the outcome, she was no longer alone in the world. When the jury returned with their verdict after only 2 hours of deliberation, Linda felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Nathan reached over to squeeze her hand as the foreman stood to deliver their decision. "We find the defendant, Linda Hill, not guilty of all charges." The relief that flooded through Linda was so intense she nearly fainted. Nathan's arms were around her immediately, holding her steady as the courtroom erupted in murmurs of approval. "It's over," he whispered in her ear. "You're free." Linda looked up at her husband through tears of joy and gratitude. "We're free," she corrected. "All of us." The journey back to the valley was triumphant. Linda was no longer a fugitive but a free woman, cleared of all charges and able to build a life without fear. Samuel seemed to sense the change in his parents' mood, babbling happily as they traveled. Linda found herself imagining the stories they would tell him when he was old enough to understand how his family had come to be. When they finally crested the ridge overlooking their valley home, Linda felt her heart swell with emotion. The community that had protected them and supported them through their darkest hours was spread out below, peaceful and welcoming in the afternoon sunlight. Nathan stopped the wagon at the overlook, and they sat together looking down at the place that had become their sanctuary. "Home," Nathan said simply. Linda nodded, understanding that this was more than just a geographical location. Home was the life they had built together, the family they had created, the community that had embraced them. Home was the love that had grown between them, despite the impossible circumstances of their first meeting. Samuel gurgled happily from his place between them, and Linda reached over to stroke his soft hair. Their son would grow up in this beautiful place, surrounded by people who valued character over reputation and kindness over judgment. As they drove down into the valley, Linda reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. She had entered Nathan's cabin as a desperate fugitive, gun in hand and fear in her heart. She was returning as Linda Hill, wife and mother, part of a family that had been forged in crisis but strengthened by love. Nathan had been right that first morning when he had told her to keep the gun but take his name instead. The gun had been a symbol of fear and desperation, but his name had become a symbol of hope and belonging. The community welcomed them back with joy and celebration. News of Linda's acquittal had preceded them, and their neighbors gathered to congratulate them and hear the details of their successful legal battle. That evening, as they settled once again into their small cabin, Linda found herself marveling at the completeness of her happiness. She had everything she had ever wanted and much that she had never dared to dream of. Nathan was putting Samuel to bed, singing softly to their son in his deep, gentle voice. Linda watched them together, this man and child who had become the center of her world, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. When Nathan joined her by the fire, she moved into his arms with the natural ease of long companionship. "No regrets?" he asked, echoing the question she had asked him months before. Linda considered all the pain and fear that had brought them together, all the challenges they had overcome, all the love they had discovered in the most unlikely circumstances. None, she said firmly, not a single one. Nathan's smile was radiant in the firelight. Good, he said, because I have plans for us, Linda Hill. Big plans. Linda laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. Tell me about these plans, Mr. Hill. As Nathan began to describe his vision for their future together, Linda listened with growing excitement. He spoke of building a larger house, of expanding their role in the community, of the children they might have together, of the life they could create in this beautiful valley. But most of all, he spoke of love, the love that had taken root between them in the most desperate circumstances and grown into something strong enough to weather any storm. Outside their small cabin, the mountain stars shone down on the peaceful valley, blessing a family that had been born of crisis but nurtured by hope. Linda Hill closed her eyes and listened to her husband's voice, her son's gentle breathing, and the quiet sounds of a community at rest. She had found her home at last.